What is going on, my beautiful people? I'm so sorry. I was trying to figure out how to do this. And I feel like a bit of an old man. I've never used the direct stream because you have to use a whole third-party setup. Can you guys drop in the comments, anyone who's hanging out? I'm learning this thing as we speak. If you're on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever else you're hanging out, can you just drop a comment? I want to see if I can see these bad boys. Maybe drop me where you are right now and what you're cooking up. Hello, hello. Can you guys all see me on live? Check out my live and see if I'm cooking. I'm rocking and rolling too. Beautiful. Can you test the comment too in the meantime? All right, cool, guys. It was manic, guys. Just for context, I just got back. I went to Ohio yesterday. I was gonna go see our warehouse, and then I was visiting a customer, and I decided to drive like an absolute maniac. And you Americans got it for me because it was an absolute snowstorm. It was rough. It was very, very rough. But I'm here. I left at 5 a.m. I came right to the office, and now we're rocking and rolling. So I appreciate all you guys hanging out. I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet. What I wanted to go through was I wanted to go through my 2025 predictions when it comes to everything happening in the logistics space. I was literally just on a call yesterday, and the brand was asking about, hey, what do you think about, there was a few things, TikTok shop and international expansion and 321. And there's a lot of horror stories happening right now. And I kind of want to give my input. And at the end of this year, I'm going to look back and I would love to know if I'm right or wrong. But more importantly, I want you guys to comment and give me your predictions of what you're thinking about. I would love to be wrong. And I want someone to clip this after and give it over to me just to show up, basically. So here's my 2025 predictions of what I think is going to be going down. So what I want to cover is 5 to 6 different sections. So I want to go through TikTok shop, some Amazon FBA changes and some of my predictions happening there. What's happening with shipping carriers, because a lot has happened over the past few months. Temu, Amazon Haul, everything quick and easy buys. And then I want to go through section 321 and what also happened with apparel brands just a few months ago. So, and I have a couple key tactics that I'm going to show by the end of it, but I'm going to cover this for the next 20 minutes, and then I want to go through some of your guys' predictions. Drop them down in the comments. I would love to hear what you're thinking about. And I just want to go on a bit of a rant of how I'm thinking about growth and what my predictions might look like. You guys can see me rock and rolling? Okay, so number 1 prediction. My first prediction is TikTok is not dying yet. I think my prediction is that, there's a lot of noise that on the 19th of January, which would be, 3 days from now, that everything is basically going to halt for the TikTok side of it. My opinion on this is that, when things are noisy and there's a little bit of fear, this is usually when I like to double down. So I don't think anything's changing anytime soon. Do I think it is going to go away? I do at some point, but I think, now what's going to happen on the 19th, you're not going to be able to download it anymore. So there's going to be limitations of what the brands can see, but this still allows, you're still going to be able to rock and roll and post for the next, call it 12 months, right? So don't look at this as a complete dying opportunity, and you're going to have to figure out social content anyway. Short-term content is not going to go anywhere. Online TikTok shop style buying is not going anywhere either. So my suggestion is don't use this as an excuse to wait for the next year. I don't think it's dying. Do I think it's going to remove from the App Store? Yes, but it's still going to be around. And I think everything that's been happening, it's going to get pushed off too. So my prediction number 1 is TikTok is not dying. TikTok shop's here to stay at least for the next year. I would still suggest doubling down in the meantime. So that's my prediction number 1. Okay, prediction number 2 is that Amazon FBA had a ton of changes happening this year. Obviously, there was a lot of impact that happened during Q4. You guys all heard from me exactly what was happening, where Amazon facilities were not able to get inbounded product fast enough. It led to brands going out of stock and a bunch of other challenges that end up happening. And because of this, I think brands started to think twice. They started to question their supply chain. They started looking at alternative options. Some brands actually went away from programs like Amazon AWD. And like you'll see them on this slide. Like there's a lot of these words that if you're not really deep into the Amazon ecosystem, they're a little bit intimidating. Like SFP, FBM, MCF, AWD. What does this all mean? I think the theme that I want to go through in my core predictions on the Amazon world, number one, Amazon fees aren't going up, at least this year. Next year, I think we will see another big hike increase just because of everything changing. But number one, fees are not going to be changing this year. But what I do think will happen is that most brands are going to use a level of diversity off of Amazon. So a lot of brands that I know now use AWD, which is Amazon's warehousing. It's like an equivalent of AMZ Prep in terms of it's like a bulk storage before you send to the Amazon hub. So you send your containers from China, you bulk store it at their facility, AWD, and then you slowly send to the actual Amazon fulfillment hubs. And these brands also use multi-channel fulfillment, which means that Amazon's fulfilling their Shopify, their TikTok shop, their Walmart, every channel, along with their FBA. That means that 90% of their revenue is at entire hands of control of what Amazon decides. We're having a lot of conversations this year that it's not that they're getting away from the channel. They just want to diversify the risk, right? It's just a natural progression of what's happening in the world. And as a seller, a lot more brands are diversifying. So one of my key predictions is that brands will start diversifying. So they'll keep FBA, that's fine. But then their e-com, they might actually go to a 3PL, right? So that they can limit, or they might use 2 3PLs across the country that can do those order fulfillment. Is it a little bit more price effective with Amazon? Maybe, but that level of control, it's this idea of don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I think brands, you don't have to go all the way to the other side, but my prediction is that brands will start to diversify the way that they think about utilizing Amazon services. Great programs, but just how much risk you want to put, I think that's on the decision of the seller. My last key prediction for Amazon in 2025, and it's where I'm making our biggest bet, it's a $10 million bet for us, is Seller Fulfilled Prime. I'm so bullish on this program, and it is probably the hardest project. Like we have a whole team working and building our Seller Fulfilled Prime product. And what this means is that it's the ability to fulfill Prime orders without using Amazon FBA facilities. So there's no inbound, there's no placement fees. You send it to an AMZ facility or another 3PL that can do fulfillment, but hit the eligibility for 2-day express. So what this means for brands is that you still get the Prime badge and all the benefits that come with it, but you're not actually using one of Amazon FBA facilities. It's one of the hardest programs in terms of eligibility. We have to operate 6 days a week. There's a ton of very certain metrics that have to be hit, but there's a cost benefit, but more importantly, it's a risk diversification. So a lot more brands are talking about Seller Fulfilled Prime because they want to control the experience, right? You need Prime. That's not a question, but they want to control the journey, right, of how they fulfill those orders. So Seller Fulfilled Prime, it's my next big bet. And I think over the next 3 years, there'll be a huge wave of brands that it becomes a lot more relevant for them than using FBA directly. That's my prediction. I would love to know if you feel otherwise. And keep dropping comments. I want to know your guys' prediction and if you agree or disagree. So prediction number 3 is that, and it happened in Canada, where we had a ton of carriers during Q4 that either shut down or they paused operations. This one's a quick one, but it's a relevant one. 10 carriers, I always messed up the grader signs back when I was in elementary school, but 10 carriers is always greater than 1 carrier. So if you're, fulfilling orders yourself, or you're using a 3PL that has only 1 carrier, it is one of the most high leverage risks that you can have in your business going into next year. The entire power, just like we're talking about Amazon, it's this theme of, never put your eggs in one basket, limit risk, diversify your options. So instead of just using UPS, spread out your risk, open up a contract with FedEx and USPS and all the major carriers. If you're using a 3PL that has 1 carrier, start trialing out 2 carriers or 3 and start seeing the options, right? The only reason that we were able to continue to fulfill during Q4 was that we had 20 plus carriers enabled, so that if one, overloaded or backhauled, we're able to just shuffle the volume. So I think this is the conversation you should be having with your 3PL. If you do it yourself, I would open up conversations with the carriers directly and see if you can at least start giving them some volume. Yes, you might not give all your business to 1 carrier, which also benefits you, but again, limit risk, diversify. You've heard it from stocks, and now I'm going to be leaning into this in the e-commerce world. So 10 carries is always going to be greater than 1. So this one's actually a really interesting one. So what happened is that with Amazon, so Temu has been obviously a massive program over the past, 2 years. It's basically blew up. It's one of the top search channels in the world, and it is coming after Amazon very, very quick. Everyone here obviously has seen Temu, and they've been a dominant force. But what Amazon recently did, and you can see from the photo, Amazon created a new beta program called Amazon Haul. And what happened with Amazon Haul is that they created basically a one-to-one. You can see from the image, it's literally a spitting image of exactly what it looks like from Temu. So this is Amazon's vision of exactly what would look like from their version of Temu. So my prediction is that this is a testing environment for Amazon. I personally don't think it has the wheels on it. Amazon always wants to trial new things, and I award them for it. But it is a very difficult. Temu has built their entire supply chain on this. My big bet is that Temu is going to continue to dominate this year, even with all things happening in the world and changes with tariffs and imports and yada, yada. Temu is going to stay on top. I think Amazon Haul, play around with it because I think it's a great idea to have fun with as an Amazon seller, but it's not something here to stay in terms of an alternative compared to Temu. That's my one prediction. I got 2 more predictions coming at you guys, and I would love to hear the rest. I think prediction number 5 is Section 321 goes away. This, by far, has been the biggest question that I've been getting asked literally for the past probably 6 months. And ever since, obviously, with the election in the US and Trump coming in, there's a lot of changes that are happening. So, there's 2 key challenges that are at play. One is that the new president wants to put tariffs on products coming into the country, whether it's from Canada or from China. They want to raise how much it costs to import the product into the country. This is what's called a tariff. And depending on, what type of product it is, if it's pet products or a microphone or an iPhone, each product has a different tariff, just like apparel brands would. So he wants to limit the programs going into this. And what Section 321 is that it's a lane that you can use from Canada or Mexico. We do a ton of it where we drive parcels across the border, but it's duties and customs free. So because it's under $800 value, it's called a de minimis. And that basically means that, hey, there's no tariffs because it's under a certain value. The president doesn't want that because now we're shipping into the country. And my big prediction is that goes away over the next, call it 18 months. I think it's going to be a very slow build. It'll be very controversial, but I think some of the key benefits of Section 321 are going to get pulled. And because of that, brands that are fulfilling from Canada or potentially from Mexico are going to have to find a central 3PL in the US to fulfill those orders, or they're going to have to change their pricing to be able to reflect the shipping costs. So you'll have to ship UPS directly and pay the tariffs to get into the country. So my prediction is 321 goes away, and I would love to hear your thoughts if you feel the same. But I think the other thing that happened was that if you guys all saw, it was in December. I don't know if any apparel brands are listening, but December, I think it was December 24th, the government of Mexico. So what used to happen was you'd be able to ship, this is specifically for apparel, you'd be able to ship to Tijuana, which is in Mexico. You could store your product there, and then you could use Section 321 to ship the product into the USA. No tariffs, no duty. It was a very, very clean program. But what happened was that this was taking away from the Mexico, economy. So because of this, the government said, hey, if you're going to bring product into the country, we have to slap you with a big old tariff for all things apparel. And apparel was just one of the big brands. I saw a number around 20% of the top 100 Shopify apparel brands are centered in Tijuana or somewhere central Mexico. And this entire program wiped overnight, which means that you have 2 options. You now either need to import directly into the US, or you have to pay, a 30% tariff, ship it to Mexico, and then ship it into the US, which just, it didn't make much sense. So this is one of the programs that it happened in Mexico. I don't think it's going to happen in any other channels, but my overall thesis is that 321 goes away. My last and final prediction is that international will be a much bigger conversation. So I think there's 2 buckets of what I'm seeing with international at the moment. Number one is that Amazon International has been a big play for quite some time. And you can, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. You can see from the trend, look where Amazon opens up hubs. They opened up Ireland. They opened up Amazon UAE. They opened up and aggressively growing for all across the pan EU. Poland opened up last year. India opened up. There's a reason, they walk so I can run. And I follow their themes very closely of where they're thinking about growth. So I think what is really happening, and half of our conversations are about, hey, how do you guys think about international? What does international look like? Can we go there? Brands that internationally expanded 2 years ago are starting to reap the fruits of labor. And the ones that aren't are all starting to ask about it this year. So I think this will be the year that all kind of the major, whether it's a D2C or an Amazon brand, actually start to move product. Canada, Mexico, they might dabble with UK and Europe. They're going to get their feet into the water. And if you don't, I truly think you'll be behind the curve. It's like, Instagram 2024, right? It's not the same as it was a few years ago. And now like TikTok, where it's more competitive, I think international is following that same trend. I think Amazon's going to lead the way, where most brands will choose an Amazon-centric approach to first build the demand, build the search volume, and then their e-com and their B2B is going to follow secondary. I don't think the brands will all move forward, at least from all the conversations we're having. You're building the brand in the UK through Amazon, leveraging their distribution, leveraging their clout that comes with it, create the aura effect. And then once you start seeing more volume, then you can start to trickle in and localize the fulfillment, open up B2B channels. So my key next prediction and my final prediction is that international will crush it this year. I think this will be one of the biggest bets. It's one of the biggest bets we're doing internally, but brands are really going to figure it out this year. So what are your guys' predictions? I want you to drop down a few questions. This is the first time I've done this through this sort of live structure. So I'm curious if you guys have any specific predictions. What do you think is happening with TikTok? Are the fees going to change on Amazon? How do those look? All things that I'm starting to think about. I'm going to do this for a couple more minutes. I want to know if you guys have any input. The salon guy. Hey, what's going on? Omar asks, what about Red Note? Omar, can you give it a little bit more context? I'd love to know what you mean by Red Note, and I'm happy to answer. Yeah, thanks, Iva. Amazing. The salon guy. The other prediction that I've been thinking about, which I'm super curious if you guys are seeing the same, is that I think Walmart will really start to build some legs. They've been doing an incredible job, and I feel like they've kind of just been the growing giant below Amazon. And I don't think a lot of brands give them the clout, but I do think that secondary marketplaces, the big four, call it Target Plus, Walmart, Wayfair, Etsy. There's a few other big, Best Buy. Best Buy just opened up their own third-party reseller seller program, so you can go 3P on Best Buy. All these secondary marketplaces, I think, are really going to start to get their feet wet. So I think Walmart's leading the pack in terms of being a close number two. But Target Plus, once the applications start to be fully allowed in, the challenge with these marketplaces is that majority of them don't allow a ton of merchants to just come in the door. Like Amazon, you can just set up and go. Where once Target Plus really starts to get its wheels, I think Target will be one of the biggest and baddest, but I think it has a little bit of wheels left. Hey, Diggy, I've heard Mr. Beast is bringing investors to purchase TikTok. If they do purchase, what would stop the ban? So it's a great question. So Diggy's asking, what happens if TikTok does get bought? So in reality of where TikTok shop is at, there's two options at the moment. Is that as of the 19th, it continues to be owned by a Chinese corporation, and if so, it will be illegal to have it on technically the app stores. In terms of none of the major app stores or the big players are going to be able to allow for you to download. Doesn't mean that's going to go off your camera, but you won't be able to update it. Think of when you had an iPhone 13. And over the years, how it just gets slower and slower. That's what's going to happen with TikTok. So it will be like you only have one leg in the marathon, and it's just going to be kind of a slow die down. I think over the next year to 2 years, just because you physically can't update. And TikTok has said they're not going to sell. They put their foot in the sand and say we're not going to sell to an American entity, or they're calling a bluff And on the 19th, they do actually sell to an American entity, whoever that might be. Maybe it is Mr. Beastiggy. And if they do sell to a US entity, then they'll be okay. They'll actually be fully allowed to run operationally in the US. And TikTok Shop is blowing up. You know how many brands that we talk to that are doing, 5,000, 10,000 orders a month? It's a shame of how great of an opportunity is that brands, aren't going to be able to run with it. But this is the world that we live in. This is this is e-com at its finest. Beautiful. Hey, what's going on? So the question was, there's a company that wants to partner with my store when they purchase my inventory and manage my store. They take on all the ad spend fees, etc., and I get paid from a PO. Thoughts? Great question. If you've seen on my LinkedIn, I got myself into a little bit of pickle with this reseller / accelerators versus selling directly. And that sounds exactly where you're at. So there's two options, right? So just to synopsis what you're saying is that you have two options when you're thinking about Amazon, right? So option number one is selling directly, right? And do what you run the ads, you pay for the listings, you run the whole store. Are you doing that now is what I'm going to ask. So that means you're running it, you have full control, you're running the operations. Or there's a program which we call 2P. So you're running a 3P Amazon store, which means you're a third party selling on Amazon. But what's called 2P means that you have an authorized reseller. They call themselves accelerators. We work with a lot of them on the fulfillment side because we're going to prep and label and ship to Amazon. The accelerator usually will cut you a PO. So they'll cut you a 6-figure PO. They'll take on all the risk of the product, and they'll manage the store. They'll manage the ad spend, the listings, the day-to-day operations, and you just need to worry about a PO. There's pros and cons to both. On the pro side, the benefit of doing that is that, so you run it 100% yourself. That's good. I think where they come into play, where an accelerator reseller is really, really strategic. So you'll lose a level of margin, obviously, because they're going to cut you a PO based off your wholesale price, not what you're selling it for. So traditionally, that's kind of the caveat. And if you're a bigger brand, obviously there's a level of brand control that you might want to keep in-house. So if you're growing, 10% month on month, 20% month on month, I don't think it might be necessary. But where reseller and accelerator really comes into play, they come with the entire infrastructure. So they're almost an agency in sense, but they're just buying the product, right? So they're running the store, they bring the Amazon expertise, they usually bring the logistics. And for you, if you don't have the capacity to run the Amazon store, it's a great solution to have because you get all the benefits, right? But now they get to run shop and you just get to cut the PO. So I think it's more of a question of, what's your resources internally and is it worthwhile to do so? My opinion, if they're willing to front the ad spend, that's a great solution. I actually don't think there's anything too wrong with that. I would love to hear from others that sell directly because it's actually a very controversial subject that I've gotten myself one too many times into the weeds between brands and the resellers because we work with both. But they want to buy at 40% retail. That's pretty good. I actually don't mind that, right? I don't know how big the Amazon store is, but if you're doing, call it less than $1 million, I think the key is that don't just hand over the keys to the ship, right? They're, accelerators and resellers, they can do a great job if done correctly, but I think it needs to still be monitored and managed with you in terms of oversight and strategy. So I think my suggestion would be set up key targets, understand where they want to go. And if they can get there faster, right? I love doing things with people that can do it faster together than trying to do it all alone. So I think if you can set up the right metrics, I think it's a great opportunity. Just set up the right parameters in terms of how you measure it, what is measured as success before, date before you marry, I guess would be, my best suggestion. But I've seen both sides. I've seen it done very successful. Try it for 90 days, right? And if it doesn't work, then continue to run as status quo. It's not going to, I think of these decisions like revolving doors, right? So there's one-way decisions and there's two-way decisions. So us, for example, investing in Seller Fulfill Prime, that involves new warehouses, new infrastructure. It is a very big investment. I would call that a one-way door, right? Two-way doors means that you can pull out of it. So a lot of my team say, okay, well, if it's a two-way decision, just go for it. We can always work backwards. If it's a one-way door, then you got to be a little bit more careful, like accepting a Walmart PO, right? That's for the most part a one way. Once you open that Pandora's box, it's here to stay. They didn't want 10% of sales on ad spend. Amazing. I suggest it. I think that's a great solution. And revert back in 90 days. Let me know how it goes. Cool, guys. Well, I appreciate your guys' questions. I wanted to keep this short and sweet because I just came from an 8-hour drive. But this is my 2025 predictions of what I think is going to happen. I'm going to replay this and review it at the end of the year. And I want to know where I went right and where I went wrong. Thank you, guys. I'll talk to you guys soon. And we'll